After a bizarre transmigration, a modern medical resident wakes up in the frail, tear-soaked body of Liling, the classic White Lotus heroine of a tragic ancient Chinese romance novel. Her destiny? They say love is unpredictable, and today's story proves it. Welcome to Romancecravestories, where every episode is full of passion, secrets, and emotional twists. Let's begin. I woke up feeling like a runaway ox cart had trampled me into a very sad, very bruised flatbread. The ornate wooden ceiling above me spun in wild, dizzying circles. My hands were shaking like leaves in a monsoon. Cold sweat clung to my forehead, and my stomach let out a hollow, whale-like groan that echoed in the silent room. I possessed the structural firmness of a bowl of overcooked noodles. I opened my eyes, trying to focus past the dark spots dancing in my vision, and immediately shrieked. Hovering barely 3 inches from my nose was a glowing, semi-transparent girl wearing a sheer, flowing hanfu. She had massive watery eyes, a pouty lower lip, and an expression of constant, tragic longing. She looked like a professional mourner, who had just lost her favorite jade hairpin. "Oh, thank the heavens, you are awake," the ghost cheered, doing a little loop-de-loop in the air that made my own stomach churn in protest. "Quickly, pinch your cheeks. You need to look beautifully flushed. The Crown Prince is coming to declare his undying, yet socially unacceptable, love for you." I blinked, trying to clear the thick fog of confusion and extreme hanger from my brain. "Who are you? And why are you floating?" "I am Liling," the ghost said proudly, puffing out her transparent chest. "Well, the original Liling. You are in my body now. The heavens sent you to fulfill my destiny because my soul was too weak to bear the plot. Isn't it simply romantic? You get to be Crown Prince Jian's hidden concubine." I choked on my own spit. Why was this body so hopelessly weak? I pressed 2 trembling fingers to my neck. My pulse was racing, thready, and faint. My skin was practically translucent, and my limbs felt heavy, cold, and utterly drained. Severe iron deficiency anemia, maybe a vitamin D deficiency from staying indoors weeping all day, and definitely chronic, wildly unmanaged low blood sugar. I was deep in the trenches of a massive hypoglycemic crash. I was literally starving to death in a palace. 5 years? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Concubine." "Yes." Liling clapped her transparent hands together. "And then, it gets even better. He takes your baby away to protect it from the wicked crown princess. Then you get to weep in the freezing, abandoned cold palace for 10 years until he brings you back to make you empress. A true fairy tale." I stared at the glowing idiot in complete silence. My modern 2026 trained medical brain short-circuited. "Oh yeah, definitely not," I deadpanned, ignoring the intense dizziness sweeping over me. "Waste 15 years of my life? Be a hidden mistress? Have my child stolen? No. Where is your dignity? Where is your self-respect?" Liling gasped, clutching her glowing jade pendant as if I had slapped her. "But it is true love. He cries when he leaves you in the cold palace. He is a toxic loser." I shot back, trying to sit up. My arms gave out immediately, and I flopped back onto the embroidered silk pillows. "Dang it. Father, mother. Why did you make this girl so frail? I have the muscle mass of a damp paper lantern, and the blood glucose levels of a hibernating bat." "It is part of my charm," Liling sniffed, floating closer to my face. "Crown Prince Jian loves how delicate I am. He says I am a fragile jewel that only he can protect. He says that so you never realize you can walk out the courtyard gates without passing out from starvation." I muttered, deeply frustrated. "Seriously, Liling, just take your body back. I am done with this plot. I have student loans back in my world that are more appealing than this. I just spent the last 4 years doing medical rotations, surviving on instant coffee and sheer spite. I am not about to trade my hard-earned medical degree to become a tragic footnote in some imperial palace drama." "I cannot," she wailed, crocodile tears streaming down her glowing face. "You must do it." Before I could explain exactly what I thought of her destiny, the heavy carved wooden doors to the bedchamber flew open. In rushed my new parents, a weeping woman in a lavish silk dress and a stern-looking minister, who seemed like he had a permanent stomachache. Right behind them strode a ridiculously handsome man wearing far too much gold dragon embroidery for a Tuesday morning. This had to be Crown Prince Jian. "My sweet Liling," the minister cried, hovering near the foot of the bed. "Leave us," Crown Prince Jian commanded. waving his hand with the supreme arrogance of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. I must speak with my fragile flower. The parents bowed low, practically scraping their foreheads against the floorboards, and scurried out. They left me completely alone with the pompous royal and my invisible ghost roommate. Jian approached the bed, his eyes filled with a highly rehearsed, fake sorrow. Liling, my sweet, I have awful news. I must marry the Prime Minister's daughter. But fear not. I have arranged a small, secret courtyard in the southern capital for you. We shall be together in the shadows. Liling's ghost squealed, doing another flip. Say yes. Faint gracefully, then say yes. I looked at Jian. I looked at my pale, violently shaking hands. Then I looked back at Jian's perfectly styled hair. Jian, I said, my voice hoarse but steady. I say this with all due disrespect. Get out of my room. Jian froze, a perfectly sculpted eyebrow twitching. What? You heard me, I said, pushing myself up to a sitting position purely out of spite and sheer willpower. A secret courtyard in the south? Do I look like a merchant's stowaway? I have severe anemia and chronic low blood sugar. If I live in a drafty, unheated courtyard on a diet of teardrops and morning dew, I will fall into a hypoglycemic coma in 3 days. Furthermore, I will not be your dirty little secret. I am breaking up with you. Jian stared at me, his jaw practically hitting the floor. But you are my jewel. You love me. I love hygiene, stable glucose levels, and not wasting 15 years of my life, I countered, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Now please leave. I need to ask my servant girls to fetch me a massive plate of roast duck, a mountain of rice, and boil down some rock sugar, so I do not pass out on this very expensive rug. As Jian stumbled out of the room in sheer confusion, Liling's ghost hovered right in front of my face, looking completely betrayed. You ruined it, she cried. I saved us, I corrected, rubbing my temples to ward off the dizzy spell. Now sit down. We are going to write a meal plan, invent a basic multivitamin syrup, and get this body strong enough to punch a royal heir. Welcome to 2026 Medical Science. Chapter 1. The heavy carved doors clicked shut behind Crown Prince Jian. The room remained quiet for exactly 3 seconds before my invisible roommate started screaming. You banished him. You banished the Crown Prince. Liling's ghost wailed, swooping wildly through the pink silk bed canopy. He offered you a secret love nest and you told him to leave. Why? Because I am practically a walking corpse, and toxic romance does not cure a severe caloric deficit. I snapped, carefully swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. My knees wobbled, shaking so badly my bones sounded like clattering bamboo sticks. My blood sugar was so low my vision had little fuzzy gray borders. If I did not get carbohydrates into my system within the next 5 minutes, I was going to faint, and I refused to pass out in a room decorated with so much tragic, weeping willow decor. Chun! I yelled. My voice was a pathetic croak, but it was loud enough. A young maid with twin buns on her head peeked into the room. She gasped, dropping a bronze basin of water on the floor with a loud clang. Eldest miss, you are out of bed. You will catch a chill and perish. I will perish if I have to consume another bowl of plain hot water, I told her, grabbing the thick wooden bedpost to steady myself. Take me to the kitchens. Now. The kitchens? Chun stammered, her eyes wide with horror. But noble young ladies do not go to the kitchens. It is dirty. There is soot. You must wait here like a delicate flower. I do not care if there are dragons breathing fire in there. Lead the way before I eat this silk pillow. With Chun practically carrying half my body weight, we shuffled out of the courtyard. Liling's ghost floated right beside my ear the whole way, sobbing transparent tears. You are ruining my refined reputation. A lady of the manor never demands food. She waits delicately to be served. A lady of the manor is currently experiencing acute hypoglycemia. I wheezed, taking a tiny step over the stone threshold. We finally reached the sprawling estate kitchens. The head cook, a wide man covered in flour, froze when he saw me. All the kitchen staff stopped chopping, boiling, and stirring. They stared at me like a yeti had just wandered in to ask for directions. Eldest miss, the cook stammered, wiping his hands on his apron. I am preparing your special restorative meal right now. He proudly pointed to a small ceramic bowl. Inside was a gray, gelatinous puddle of bird's nest soup. It looked like sadness boiled down to a syrup. Throw that out, I commanded, leaning heavily against a wooden prep table to keep my legs from buckling. "Miss. Throw it out," I repeated, my eyes scanning the room like a hawk. My gaze locked onto a glorious, glistening roast duck hanging by the stone hearth. Right next to it was a plate of shiny candied hawthorns, glazed in hardened sugar syrup. I lunged. Well, it was more of a slow, pathetic stumble, but the intent was fierce. I grabbed a stick of candied hawthorns and bit down. The sugar hit my tongue, and I almost wept with pure, unfiltered joy. The immediate spike in blood glucose felt like rain after a 10-year drought. My vision cleared. The violent shaking in my hands lessened by a fraction. "Miss Liling!" Chun shrieked, waving her hands frantically. "That has too much flavor. Your delicate constitution cannot handle the shock." "My constitution is thrilled." I mumbled around a mouthful of crunchy sugar. I pointed a sticky finger at the cook. "Listen to me very carefully. From this day forward, the menu changes entirely. I want roasted meats. I want mountains of white rice. I want steamed buns filled with pork. I want leafy greens cooked in garlic, and I want snacks delivered to my room every 3 hours." Liling's ghost gasped, clutching her face in horror. "Pork? Garlic? Jian hates the smell of garlic. How will he kiss you in the moonlight?" "He won't because I dumped him," I reminded the ghost, taking another massive bite of the hawthorn. "Cook, did you hear me?" The cook nodded furiously, simply too stunned to argue with the previously frail, weeping daughter of the minister. Just then my father and mother burst into the kitchen, flanked by 2 confused estate guards. "Liling, what is the meaning of this?" my father roared, though his stern face was pale with worry. "You should be resting. Crown Prince Jian told us you were deeply distressed." "I am distressed by my lack of iron and protein, father," I said calmly, plucking a piece of crispy duck skin from the cutting board and eating it right in front of them. My mother looked like she was about to faint into a basket of cabbages. "The physicians have been treating me wrong. To cure my stagnant blood, I must eat the richest foods of the estate. And I must build my strength." To prove my point, I wiped my hands on a towel, laid down flat on the relatively clean kitchen floor, and crossed my arms over my chest. "What are you doing?" my mother cried, rushing forward. "Medical physical therapy," I grunted. I pulled my shoulders off the floor, engaging my completely non-existent core muscles. My face turned bright red, my breath hitched, but I managed a full sit-up. 1. Liling's ghost buried her face in her hands, weeping loudly. "My grace. My elegance. It is gone. I am a brute." I ignored her, lowering myself back down to the stone tiles. "Cook," I panted, preparing for sit-up number 2. "Keep that duck warm. I am going to need it in about 5 minutes. Chapter 2. It was the middle of the night, and the moon hung high over the minister's estate. I was wide awake. The massive dinner of roast duck and garlic greens had done wonders, but my metabolism was currently a fragile, confusing mess. I needed a midnight snack to keep my blood glucose stable until dawn. I sat cross-legged on my silk bed, chewing aggressively on a cold steamed pork bun. Ghost Liling floated nearby, sulking with her arms crossed over her transparent chest. Ladies of noble birth do not eat in the dark like feral badgers. Feral badgers survive the winter. I mumbled with my mouth full. Rustle. A noise scratched at the carved wooden window lattice. Before I could ask Chun to check it, the window slid open. A figure dressed in dark, expensive silk vaulted into the room, landing in what was clearly meant to be a dashing, heroic crouch. He stood up, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, letting the moonlight hit his face at a calculated angle. "Liling, my fragile flower," Crown Prince Jian whispered loudly, taking a dramatic step forward. I could not stay away. Liling's ghost squealed, doing a joyful flip in the air. I knew it. True love conquers all. "Quick, hide the pork bun." I did not hide the pork bun. I just stared at him, mid-chew. "Are you breaking and entering?" Jian gracefully strode over to the bed, entirely ignoring my very valid legal question. "I know your harsh words this afternoon were born of deep sorrow. The pain of our forbidden love clouded your mind. You were lashing out to protect your own heart." I swallowed heavily, setting the bun down on a plate. "No, my mind is exceptionally clear now that I am not starving. My glucose is finally stabilizing." He reached for my hand. I let him take it, but immediately flipped his wrist over, pressing my index and middle fingers firmly against his radial artery. "Ah, Jian smiled, a smug, knowing look settling on his face. You cannot resist my touch. You wish to feel the warmth of my skin. Your pulse is steady, bounding, and slightly fast. Typical for a man who just snuck over a stone wall. I noted, my medical brain automatically cataloging the data. Your skin is slightly dry, and your gums, smile for a second? Yes, slightly swollen. Mild vitamin C deficiency. Eat a pomelo. And your excessive belief that I am weeping over your presence confirms a severe case of clinical narcissism. Jian blinked, completely lost. Narcissism? Is that a rare type of poetry from the western provinces? It means you are hopelessly obsessed with yourself. I translated, pulling my hand away and wiping it on my blanket. I told you to leave this afternoon. Why are you in my bedroom? He dropped to one knee, looking up at me with pleading eyes. Because the carriage leaves for the southern courtyard tomorrow night. We must seal our promise under the moonlight. Come away with me, my Lotus. My stomach gave a low rumble. I was out of pork buns. My blood sugar was dipping downward again, and a fresh wave of hangry rage began bubbling up fast. I am not going to your drafty southern courtyard to be your secret concubine, I said, sliding off the bed. My legs were much steadier than they had been 12 hours ago. Jian stood up, his romantic facade cracking to reveal deep annoyance. Liling, do not play these games. I am the Crown Prince. I am offering you my heart. I cannot eat your heart, and it certainly will not regulate my blood sugar, I retorted. I walked over to the corner of the room, where my maid Chun had left a long bamboo sweeping broom. I picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy for my weak arms, but spite is an excellent physical motivator. What are you doing with that filthy thing? Jian demanded, stepping back so the dust wouldn't touch his robes. Shooing a pest, I declared. I swung the broom. The bristly end smacked Jian right in his perfectly embroidered shins. Ow, he yelped, jumping backward. Liling, have you gone mad? Mad with hunger and a sudden, fierce desire for personal boundaries. I yelled, poking him in the stomach with the wooden handle. Ghost Liling was shrieking, flying around the room in a complete panic. Do not strike the imperial heir. That is treason. They will execute our family. It is pest control. I swung again, catching him on the thigh. Jian scrambled backward toward the window, his royal dignity entirely shattered. You are not acting like my sweet, delicate jewel. The lotus has thorns. Wait, no, that is a rose. Whatever, the lotus has a bamboo broom. I shouted, chasing him across the imported woven rugs. He didn't even bother with a graceful exit. Jian practically tumbled out the window backward, landing with a loud, undignified thud in the courtyard bushes below. I leaned out the window, pointing the broom at the rustling leaves. Eat some citrus. And if you come back, I am aiming for your head. I slammed the wooden shutters closed, locked them tight, and turned back to my bed. Ghost Liling was staring at me, her transparent jaw hanging open. You beat the future emperor with a sweeping stick. And tomorrow, I said, picking up the last crumb of my steamed bun, we tackle breakfast. Chapter 3. The next evening, I decided it was time to fully integrate myself back into the household. Hiding in my room waiting for Chun to smuggle in pork buns was not a long-term survival strategy. I needed direct access to the main dining hall, where the real food lived. Ghost Liling floated beside me as I marched down the open-air corridors of the estate. You are walking too fast, she complained, tugging at her spectral hair. A noble lady glides. She sways gently in the breeze like a delicate willow branch. I am walking with purpose because there is braised pork belly at the end of this hallway, I replied, adjusting my heavy silk sleeves. If I sway like a willow branch, I will trip over these ridiculous skirts and fracture a kneecap. I pushed open the carved mahogany doors to the dining hall. My father, the minister, and my mother were seated at a long, low table covered in exquisite porcelain dishes. When they saw me standing in the doorway, my mother dropped her ivory chopsticks. They clattered loudly onto the floor. My father turned so pale I thought I might need to check his pulse next. Liling, my father gasped, half rising from his embroidered cushion. What are you doing out of bed? Has the fever taken your mind? Are you experiencing the final surge of vitality before the end? I am experiencing the desire for dinner, I said, walking over and taking a seat on a silk cushion. I reached out, grabbed a fresh pair of chopsticks, and immediately snagged a massive piece of glazed pork. My parents watched in stunned silence as I chewed, swallowed, and immediately reached for a steamed dumpling. She is holding her own chopsticks, my mother whispered to my father, as if witnessing a hound perform a card trick. Usually, Chun has to feed her rice gruel from a tiny silver spoon. Rice gruel is a culinary tragedy, I stated, pointing my chopsticks at a plate of garlic greens. Pass the vegetables, please. And the roasted chicken. My sweet daughter, my father said slowly, looking at me as if I might explode at any moment. Crown Prince Jian's attendant came by the estate this morning. He said you suffered a terrible fit of madness last night. He claimed you chased the prince out of your window with a sweeping broom. I paused, a dumpling halfway to my mouth. Ghost Liling shrieked, hiding her transparent face behind a nearby decorative vase. It was not madness, father. It was a severe drop in my blood sugar combined with his profound lack of boundaries. I explained smoothly, popping the dumpling into my mouth. I have officially broken off my romantic entanglement with him. I will not be moving to his southern courtyard. My mother let out a small, high-pitched squeak and promptly slumped sideways in a dead faint. My father caught her, his eyes wide with panic. You rejected the crown prince, he sputtered. But your delicate heart, your undying devotion. My heart is currently pumping blood at a much more stable rate, thank you. And my devotion is now strictly directed toward maintaining a healthy blood glucose level. I set my chopsticks down and looked my father dead in the eye. Listen to me very carefully. From now on, my medical condition requires constant management. The dizzy spells, the fainting, the weeping. It is all because my body runs out of fuel. My father looked utterly lost. Fuel? Like a wood stove? Exactly, I nodded, thrilled he grasped the metaphor so quickly. I am a very inefficient wood stove. Therefore, I am implementing a new household protocol. I need you and mother to carry dried plums, candied ginger, or sugar drops in your pockets at all times. In our pockets? My father repeated, glancing down at his heavily embroidered minister's robes. But I am a high-ranking official. I carry state seals and imperial decrees, not snacks. If you see me start to shake, or if I suddenly become deeply pessimistic about the world, you must immediately hand me a dried plum. If you do not, I will pass out, and you will have to carry me. Do you really want to carry me, father? He looked at my mother, who was still unconscious against his shoulder, and then back at me. I will instruct the tailor to sew deeper pockets into my formal robes. Excellent, I said, picking my chopsticks back up. Now please wake mother up. The soup is getting cold, and I need to eat at least 3 more bowls before I attempt another sit-up. From behind the vase, Ghost Liling let out a long, dramatic sigh. You have broken the crown prince's heart, and turned my noble father into a walking pantry. We are ruined. I just smiled and reached for the chicken. Chapter 4. The morning sun filtered through the paper windows, casting a warm glow over my bedroom. I stood in the center of the woven floor mat, a heavy bamboo medical scroll in each hand, raising them slowly above my head. 1. I grunted, my pathetic shoulder muscles trembling. 2. Ghost Liling was hovering near the ceiling, her face buried in her transparent hands. You are sweating. Maidens of the imperial court do not sweat. They merely glisten with the gentle dew of youth. If I do not sweat, my core temperature will rise, and I will pass out, I panted, lowering the scrolls. 3. Besides, this dew of youth is why you had the physical stamina of a cooked cabbage. You are ruining me, Liling wailed, doing a dramatic spin that sent her floating over my bed canopy. First, you beat the crown prince with a sweeping broom. Then you ate garlic in front of your father. Now you are lifting ancient texts like a common laborer. My reputation as the capital's most delicate, tragic beauty is in ruins. I dropped the bamboo scrolls with a loud clatter, and wiped my forehead with a silk sleeve. My stomach gave a tiny, warning rumble. I immediately walked over to my vanity table, opened a lacquered jewelry box, and pulled out a candied plum. I popped it into my mouth, chewing thoughtfully while my blood glucose leveled out. Liling, come down here. We need to have a roommate meeting. She floated down, her pout so pronounced it could have won an award for theatrical sorrow. I am a spirit tethered to my stolen body. I do not attend meetings. Sit, I commanded, pointing to the empty stool beside me. She hovered an inch above it, crossing her arms. Fine. What? We are sharing this life right now, And your constant weeping is bad for my blood pressure. I told her, leaning forward. We need ground rules. I am willing to compromise, but you have to work with me. Liling sniffed. What kind of compromise? Rule number 1. I said, holding up a finger. No more wailing when I exercise or eat. If my blood sugar drops, I fall into a coma. That means no more skipping meals to look delightfully frail. I am going to eat roast duck, I am going to eat steamed buns, and I am going to build enough muscle to walk up a flight of stairs without needing a nap. You will remain silent during these activities. But what about my refined image? She protested. That brings us to rule number 2. I promise I will not completely destroy your reputation. I offered her a reassuring smile. I will not become a bandit or join a traveling circus. Instead, we are doing a rebrand. A rebrand? Liling tilted her head, clearly unfamiliar with the concept. We are upgrading your public persona from tragic doormat to eccentric medical scholar. It is a very respectable trope. People will look at my massive appetite and strange habits and say, ah yes, Liling the scholar. Her brilliant mind simply requires more sustenance than a normal woman. Liling's glowing eyes widened slightly. She seemed to consider this. An eccentric scholar? Like old Master Wu, who lives in the mountains and talks to birds. Exactly, I lied seamlessly. Except I will talk to patients and cure illnesses. It gives you an air of mystery. Crown Prince Jian wanted a fragile flower he could lock in a southern courtyard. A mysterious scholar is far too complex for him to control. He did say I was too simple for court politics, Liling mumbled, her ghostly shoulders slumping. He said the southern courtyard was for my own good. Because I was not clever enough to survive the palace. He insulted your intelligence to keep you isolated. I pointed out gently. That is classic manipulative behavior. You deserve better than a man who hides you in the shadows and calls it love. Liling looked down at her transparent hands. For the first time, the tragic theatrical sorrow faded, replaced by a tiny spark of genuine reflection. Do you truly think I can be a scholar? I have the medical knowledge of 2026 locked in my brain, and you have the local language and customs, I said, reaching into the jewelry box and pulling out another candied plum. Together, we are going to be the most brilliant physician this dynasty has ever seen. Deal. Liling slowly nodded, a small, tentative smile appearing on her face. Deal. Just then the door slid open, and Chun hurried in carrying a massive silver tray. Eldest miss. The kitchen sent your mid-morning snack. 5 steamed pork buns, a bowl of sweet lotus seed soup, and sliced roasted beef. Put it right here, Chun. I grinned, cracking my knuckles. Liling watched me reach for the first pork bun. She didn't wail. She didn't cry. She just sighed softly and said, please try not to get meat juice on the silk. It stains horribly. Progress. Chapter 5. I was halfway through a mid-afternoon plate of honey-glazed sweet potato cakes when a loud, rhythmic chanting echoed across the courtyard. It sounded like a choir of bullfrogs trapped in a bronze gong. I paused mid-chew, reaching for my cup of warm tea. Chun, what is that noise? My maid wrung her hands, her face pale. It is Dr. Liu, eldest Mississippi old Gao, the head gardener, scraped his arm on a rusty iron gate 3 days ago. The wound has turned red and hot. Dr. Liu says the plague ghosts have nested in his flesh, so he is performing a cleansing ritual to smoke them out. I closed my eyes and took a very deep breath. My 2026 medical degree wept silently in my brain. Plague ghosts. Yes, miss, Chun nodded fervently. Dr. Liu is using the most expensive sage. Grab the rest of these cakes and follow me, I ordered, standing up. I tucked a small piece of candied ginger into my sash, a necessary precaution, as dealing with medical incompetence always made my blood sugar drop incredibly fast. Ghost Liling floated along beside me as I marched toward the servant quarters. Please do not interfere, she fretted. Dr. Liu has a very long beard. Only the most distinguished physicians have beards that reach their belts. He clearly knows what he is doing. Having facial hair does not equal a medical license, Liling, I muttered. We reached old Gao's room. The air was thick with gray, choking smoke. Dr. Liu, a man who looked older than the stone walls of the estate, was waving a bundle of smoldering weeds over the poor gardener's swollen forearm. He was chanting loudly, occasionally spitting into a brass bowl. Out foul spirits! Release this flesh! Dr. Liu bellowed. I walked right up to the bed, waving the smoke away from my face. I examined the wound. It was a classic, localized bacterial infection. It needed to be cleaned, sterilized, and bandaged, not marinated in weed smoke. Dr. Liu, I said loudly, trying to cut through the chanting. Please stop trying to cure a staph infection with a barbecue. The old man froze, staring at me as if I had just fallen from the sky. Eldest miss, you must not be here. The foul spirits will latch onto your fragile form. The only thing latching onto me is the smell of burning sage, I replied, crossing my arms. I turned to the cluster of terrified servants hovering in the doorway. Someone bring me a basin of boiling water, clean white linen that has been held over a fire, and the strongest clear grain wine from the cellars. Now. No one moved. They just stared at me. My stomach gave a sudden, sharp twist. My hands started to tremble slightly. The classic pre-crash hunger pangs were hitting. I reached into my sash, pulled out the candied ginger, and chewed it aggressively. Just then, my father strode into the room, his official robe swishing. Liling, what is the meaning of this commotion? Father, I said, pointing a sticky finger at Dr. Liu. This man is trying to treat an infected laceration with smoke. Old Gao is going to lose his arm if we do not clean it properly. Please tell the servants to fetch what I asked for. My father paused. He looked at Dr. Liu's smoky bundle, then at my very serious expression. He reached into his newly sewn, extra deep pockets, pulled out a dried plum, and held it out to me just in case. I took it with a nod of gratitude. Do as my daughter says. My father barked at the servants. Within minutes, I had my supplies. I washed my hands thoroughly in the hot water, much to the confusion of everyone in the room. Then, I poured the strong grain wine directly over old Gao's wound. The gardener hissed in pain, but the alcohol did its job. I carefully cleaned the area and wrapped it in the sterilized linen. There, I said, wiping my forehead. Keep it clean, change the cloth daily, and do not let Dr. Liu anywhere near it with his weed wand. Dr. Liu was trembling with indignation. You insult the ancient arts. You speak of cleaning, but washing brings the damp cold into the bones. I stood up, facing the entire crowd of servants. Listen to me very carefully. Evil spirits do not cause wounds to rot. Invisible boogies do. They live in the dirt, on rusty metal, and on your unwashed hands. From this day forward, there is a new rule in this estate. If you use the latrine, you wash your hands with soap and water. If you prepare food, you wash your hands. If you touch a wound, you wash your hands. Chun gasped, clutching her face. Invisible bugs? Crawling all over us? Eldest miss, you speak of dark magic. It is not magic, it is basic hygiene. I groaned, rubbing my temples. Ghost Liling floated next to my shoulder, shaking her head. Talking about latrines and dirty hands in public. How unglamorous. Crown Prince Jian would be horrified. Good. I smiled, tossing the dried plum into my mouth. Maybe he will stop trying to climb through my window. Chapter 6. I was sitting in my garden pavilion, thoroughly enjoying a massive bowl of candied walnuts, when trouble arrived. Chun came sprinting across the stone path, her face flushed and her twin buns practically vibrating with panic. Eldest miss. She is here. The Prime Minister's daughter, Zhao Min. The one Crown Prince Jian is betrothed to. She has breached the front gates. Ghost Liling materialized instantly, hovering over my bowl of walnuts. Oh no. The villainess. She has come to mock your tragic fate. Quick, splash some water on your face, so it looks like you have been crying all morning. I am not wasting perfectly good hydration on fake tears, I said, tossing a walnut into my mouth. Let her come. If she tries to slap me, I will throw this entire bowl at her shins. Moments later, Zhao Min strode into the pavilion. She was stunning, but in a way that looked incredibly painful. She wore layers of stiff, heavily embroidered red silk, and her hair was piled high in an elaborate style held together by at least 10 pounds of solid gold hairpins. She slammed her delicate hands down on my stone table, glaring at me. So you are the infamous Liling, the frail, weeping flower who tried to steal my future husband. I chewed my walnut, looking her up and down. She was holding her neck at a very stiff, awkward angle, and her left eye was twitching slightly. I did not try to steal him, I corrected, swallowing. I chased him out of my room with a broom. Please sit down. You look like you are about to snap your own spine in half. Min blinked, her fierce glare faltering for a fraction of a second. What did you say to me? I said sit down, I repeated, pushing the bowl of candied walnuts toward her. You are very cranky. It is either low blood glucose or a massive tension headache from carrying a small jewelry store on your head. Have a snack. Ghost Liling gasped so loudly, she sounded like a deflating balloon. You are offering the villainess our premium snacks? She is supposed to insult you, and then you are supposed to cough blood into a handkerchief. Min stared at the bowl of walnuts, then back at me. You are not weeping. Crying burns calories, and I am on a strict diet to regain my strength, I explained. I stood up and walked around the stone table, stopping right behind her. Your posture is a disaster. Your shoulders are touching your ears. No wonder you are in a bad mood. Do not touch me. Min snapped, though she did not move away. My posture is perfectly regal. Your posture is a one-way ticket to chronic cervical spine pain, I diagnosed. Take a deep breath. Relax your jaw. Before she could argue, I placed my hands on her shoulders and applied a very specific, practiced pressure to her upper back, giving a sharp, controlled thrust. Crack. It sounded like a thick dry branch snapping in half. Min let out a short, high-pitched scream. Chun dropped a tea tray in the grass. Ghost Liling covered her eyes and wailed. You have assassinated the Prime Minister's daughter. We are all going to the executioner's block. Min sat perfectly still for 5 seconds, her eyes wide. Then slowly, she rolled her shoulders. She tilted her head to the left, then to the right. A look of profound, heavenly relief washed over her sharp features. Oh my, Min whispered. Oh my goodness. I have had a headache for 3 years, and it is just gone. You need to take out at least 4 of those heavy gold hairpins, I advised, walking back to my seat. And stop sleeping on those hard porcelain pillows. They are terrible for your neck. Min looked at me, completely bewildered. All her aggressive posturing had vanished. She slumped slightly in her chair, dropping the regal act entirely, and reached for a candied walnut. Crown Prince Jian told me you were a simple-minded, fragile creature, who only knew how to cry and play the zither, she mumbled around the crunch of the sugar. He told me you were a wicked, heartless woman who would throw my future children down a well. I replied cheerfully, pouring her a cup of tea. Min snorted a very unladylike sound. Please. I do not have the time to throw children down wells. I am too busy managing my father's estate accounts. Honestly, Jian is a complete fool. All he does is talk about his own poetry and stare at his reflection in ponds. I know, I laughed, taking another walnut. He came to my window the other night, and I diagnosed him with profound narcissism. He thought it was a compliment. Min let out a loud, genuine laugh that echoed through the garden. Ghost Liling peeked out from behind a pillar, looking utterly lost. I do not understand. Are we not rivals? Why is the villainess drinking our tea and laughing about the Crown Prince's poetry? Because Liling, I whispered to the empty air, bonding over a mutual annoyance is a far superior relationship dynamic. I raised my teacup to Min. She clinked her cup against mine. And just like that, the capital's most feared villainess became my favorite person in the entire dynasty. Chapter 7. The mid-autumn banquet at the Imperial Palace was a massive, glowing affair. Thousands of painted paper lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm light over tables piled high with exotic fruits and roasted meats. My mother had tried to wrestle me into a tightly bound silk sash, but I calmly reminded her that restricting my digestion would lead to a severe hypoglycemic episode right in front of the emperor. Instead, I wore a flowing, comfortable hanfu with hidden, custom-sewn pockets currently holding 3 candied hawthorn sticks and a heavy pouch of roasted almonds. Ghost Liling was floating near the ceiling beams, panicking. Look at the emperor. Look at the empress. Keep your eyes downcast. Do not look at the roasted pig. It is unseemly. I am calculating the protein content of that pig, I whispered back, taking my seat next to my father. The minister patted his heavy silk robes, giving me a solemn nod to reassure me that he was fully stocked with emergency dried plums. Across the room, Xiaomin caught my eye and raised her cup of plum wine in a silent, mocking toast. Her posture was magnificent, and she had reduced her heavy hairpins to a highly manageable 3. I smiled and grabbed a large, fluffy steamed pork bun from the center of our table. Just as I took a massive, glorious bite, the crowd near us parted. Crown Prince Jian strolled toward our table, looking like a walking gold leaf statue. He stopped right in front of me, striking a pose that clearly took hours of practice in front of a mirror. Liling, he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed sorrow. Though we are apart, the moon shines on us both. Let me recite a poem I wrote for your tragic, fading beauty. He cleared his throat. I kept chewing. Oh, fragile flower weeping in the cold dew. Wait, I said, holding up a sticky hand. I swallowed the bite of my steamed bun. Before you continue. Jian paused, looking deeply annoyed that I had ruined his dramatic rhythm. What is it, my Lotus? Did you wash your hands after using the royal latrine? I asked. My voice was entirely too loud. The court musicians had stopped playing their lutes at that exact moment. So my question carried across the silent banquet hall like a ringing bronze bell. Jian's jaw dropped. The surrounding courtiers gasped. My father panicked, assuming I was having a mental collapse from low blood sugar, and instinctively threw a dried plum at my face. It bounced harmlessly off my forehead. Excuse me. Jian sputtered, his face turning the color of a bruised peach. I saw you shake hands with the Minister of Rights, and then you touched the rim of your wine cup, I pointed out, gesturing with my half-eaten bun. Have you washed your hands with soap and hot water? Because if not, you are spreading invisible intestinal bugs to everyone in this room, and no amount of poetry will cure widespread dysentery. Ghost Liling covered her transparent face and wailed. We are doomed. The Emperor will banish us to the wastelands. Instead of a royal decree of banishment, a loud, highly undignified snort broke the silence. Zhao Min was laughing so hard she was bent double over her table. She slapped her hand down, completely losing her regal composure, and accidentally knocked her overflowing cup of plum wine right into Jian's lap. Oh, my deepest apologies, Crown Prince. Min gasped between peals of laughter, not looking sorry in the slightest. I was just overwhelmed by your poetry. Jian shrieked, backing away with a dark purple stain spreading rapidly across his gold-embroidered trousers. He looked exactly like he had wet himself. He fled the banquet hall in complete disgrace, leaving behind a trail of dripping wine and his shattered dignity. I took another bite of my bun and looked at my father. See, this is why proper hygiene is so important. This is an original story by romancecravestories. If you see it uploaded on another channel, please report it to YouTube and let us know. Thank you for supporting original creators. Chapter 8. The summons arrived at dawn, delivered by a palace eunuch with a voice so high-pitched it made the estate's guard dogs howl. The Empress required my immediate presence in her private pavilion. Ghost Liling was spiraling in mid-air, clutching her face. She is going to force you to drink poison wine, or bestow you with 3 yards of white silk to hang yourself. This is what happens when you spill plum wine on the royal heir. I did not spill it, Min did. I merely asked about his hand-washing habits. I corrected, calmly instructing Chun to help me dress. I bypassed the stifling, heavily embroidered formal wear and selected a breathable, layered hanfu in soft cream and sage, tied securely with a broad, slate-colored sash. It was elegant but loose enough to ensure proper circulation. More importantly, I had Chun sew small, hidden compartments into the folds of the rose-tinted inner robes. These compartments were currently packed with sugar drops, dried dates, and salted almonds. I was not walking into the imperial lion's den without a steady supply of emergency glucose. The carriage ride to the palace was bumpy, but I maintained my equilibrium by snacking on a date every 15 minutes. When the palace guards finally ushered me into the Empress's pavilion, the air was thick with burning incense. The most powerful woman in the dynasty sat on a raised platform, draped in heavy silks that looked suffocating. She wore a stern, haughty expression designed to make lesser mortals crumble into dust. Liling, the Empress spoke, her voice echoing in the large room. The fragile, weeping minister's daughter who has somehow caused my son to lock himself in his quarters and refuse his morning porridge. I bowed respectfully, making sure not to lock my knees so I wouldn't pass out. Greeting, Your Majesty. I assure you, whatever the Crown Prince is suffering from, it is likely a bruised ego and a ruined pair of trousers, not a broken heart. The Empress narrowed her eyes. She leaned forward to glare at me properly, resting her hands on the carved wooden armrests of her throne. As she did, she gave a sharp, involuntary wince. Her knuckles were visibly swollen, red and stiff. You dare speak of his ego? She snapped, picking up a porcelain teacup. I watched her fingers tremble slightly. She couldn't fully close her grip around the delicate ceramic. Your Majesty, I said, stepping forward instead of cowering. Is the pain worse in the morning, or when it rains? The Empress froze, the teacup hovering near her lips. The terrifying glare faltered, replaced by total bewilderment. What? Your hands, I pointed. Your joints are inflamed. I suspect you have chronic arthritis, exacerbated by the damp palace air, and the sheer weight of the gold rings you are wearing. Ghost Liling swooped down, hovering frantically right in my line of sight. Do not diagnose the Empress. She will have your tongue cut out for implying she is flawed. The Empress slowly lowered the cup. The imperial physicians say it is stagnant wind in my bones. They make me drink bitter root tea that tastes like swamp mud. Swamp mud will not help inflammation, I said, entirely ignoring court protocol. My medical brain had taken over. I reached into my sleeve, pulled out a sugar drop, and popped it into my mouth to keep my blood sugar stable during the consultation. You need a topical treatment. Have your maids boil ginger root, willow bark, and a handful of coarse salt. Soak a thick linen cloth in the hot water and wrap it around your hands twice a day. The willow bark contains compounds that mimic modern pain relief, and the heat will reduce the stiffness. The Empress stared at me. Her royal guard stared at me. Even the high-pitched eunuch stared at me. You are not crying, the Empress finally noted, leaning back against her cushions. Jian said you were a tragic creature who wept at the sight of a falling leaf. I simply do not have the caloric surplus to waste on recreational crying, Your Majesty, I replied truthfully. Furthermore, I highly recommend you switch your rings to a lighter metal, perhaps jade or hollowed silver. The heavy gold is putting unnecessary strain on your tendons. The pavilion remained dead silent for a long, awkward moment. I briefly wondered if I had finally gone too far, and was about to be dragged off to the dungeons. Then the Empress looked down at her swollen, painful hands. She slowly slid a massive, solid gold ring off her index finger, and set it on the table with a heavy clunk. Ginger, willow bark, and coarse salt, the Empress repeated softly. She looked back up at me, her expression entirely unreadable. You are not a jewel, Liling. You are a very strange, very bold little sprout. I try to be a well-fed sprout, Your Majesty, I bowed again. The Empress waved her hand dismissively. Leave me. I need to yell at the imperial physicians for feeding me swamp mud. As I walked out of the pavilion, popping another almond into my mouth, Ghost Liling let out a massive sigh of relief. We survived. You insulted the royal doctors and lived. Of course we lived, I smiled, stepping out into the bright courtyard sunlight. Never underestimate the power of a good anti-inflammatory prescription. Chapter 9. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when a loud commotion erupted in the main courtyard. My mother's wailing pierced the evening air, sounding like a startled goose. I grabbed a handful of dried dates from my desk drawer, stuffed them into my sleeve pockets, and hurried out. Ghost Liling trailed behind me, wringing her transparent hands. Oh whoa! Tragedy strikes our noble house once more. In the center of the courtyard, 4 guards were carrying my father. The minister was clutching his heavily embroidered stomach, groaning loudly. His face was a sickly shade of gray, and he was sweating profusely. My husband is perishing, my mother cried, dramatically throwing herself over his legs. Old Dr. Liu, who had apparently forgiven me for the sage incident, was already hovering nearby. He stroked his long beard, looking incredibly grave. The minister is suffering from stagnant wind in his central meridian. A dark fog has invaded his liver. We must immediately pierce his fingertips to let the foul humors escape. My father let out another pitiful groan. Nobody is piercing any fingertips, I announced, pushing my way through the crowd of panicked servants. I popped a dried date into my mouth to ensure my brain had enough glucose to deal with this nonsense. Liling, stay back, my mother sobbed. The dark fog might be contagious. I rolled my eyes, knelt beside my father, and placed a hand on his forehead. No fever. His pulse was strong but slightly fast, mostly from pain and panic. I pressed lightly on his upper abdomen. He yelped. Father, I said calmly, what did you eat at the ministry banquet today? He cracked one eye open. Just a light meal. 4 plates of roasted pork belly, a platter of fried dough rings, 2 bowls of duck fat rice, and, perhaps a small mountain of glazed beef. And when was the last time you ate a leaf? Or a root? Or anything that grew in the dirt? I asked. My father blinked, looking deeply offended. I am a high-ranking official. I do not eat peasant weeds. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Dr. Liu, my father does not have a dark fog in his liver. He has a massive crippling case of acid reflux and severe indigestion caused by a total lack of dietary fiber. Ghost Liling gasped loudly, covering her ears. A maiden of the inner quarters does not speak of bowels and digestion. You are bringing shame upon our ancestors. I ignored the ghost and turned to Chun, who was hovering nervously holding a brass basin. Chun, run to the kitchens. I need a large pot of strong ginger tea. Then I want the cook to boil a giant bowl of cabbage. Plain cabbage. No oil, no pork fat. Cabbage, my father whispered weakly. But the stagnant wind. Your wind is stagnant because your intestines are packed tighter than a merchant's wagon, I said bluntly. Dr. Liu puffed out his chest. You cannot cure a meridian blockage with peasant soup. He needs powdered pearls and crushed cicada shells. If you feed him crushed shells, he will vomit on his silk robes, and I will make you wash them, I threatened. Dr. Liu quietly stepped back. Once the ginger tea arrived, I forced my father to sit up and drink the entire pot. The heat and the ginger immediately began to soothe his inflamed stomach lining. Next came the bowl of plain, boiled cabbage. Eat, I commanded. Every single leaf. He chewed miserably, looking like a defeated warlord. Now, I instructed, brushing my hands together. Stand up. You are going to walk laps around the lotus pond. Upright movement aids the digestive process. Supported by 2 guards, my father began to slowly pace around the garden. After the 3rd lap, he stopped. His eyes went wide. He clutched his stomach. The entire courtyard held its breath. Then, the Minister of Rites let out a burp so loud it scattered the pigeons resting on the roof tiles. My mother shrieked. Ghost Liling fainted in mid-air. My father stood up a little straighter. The gray tint vanished from his cheeks. He took a deep breath, patted his stomach and smiled. By the heavens! The dark fog has left my body. I feel completely cured. He looked at me, sheer awe in his eyes. Liling, you are a marvel. You possess the wisdom of the ancient sages. I possess basic common sense and an understanding of human anatomy, I corrected, fishing another date out of my pocket. From now on, you are eating a bowl of greens with every meal, or I am letting Dr. Liu pierce your fingers. My father shuddered. Whatever you say, my brilliant daughter. Whatever you say. As the courtyard cleared out, Ghost Liling floated back up, looking dazed. You saved him with a cabbage. You are officially the smartest person in the household. Yes, I smiled, tossing the date into my mouth. And tomorrow we open a clinic. Chapter 10. I was sitting in my garden pavilion with Zhao Min, thoroughly enjoying a peaceful afternoon. We were discussing the anatomical benefits of ditching heavy court shoes for soft, flat cotton slippers. I was halfway through a warm, fluffy lotus seed bun, my blood sugar perfectly balanced, when the tranquility shattered. Crown Prince Jian marched through the circular moon gate. He was flanked by 2 burly palace guards and wore an expression of supreme smugness. Ghost Liling instantly materialized, nearly knocking over my empty teacup with her spectral flailing. He has returned. Oh, the drama. He is going to sweep you away into the shadows. He is going to sweep himself into the lotus pond if he interrupts my snack, I muttered. Min took a calm sip of her jasmine tea, entirely unbothered by the royal intrusion. Look at him strutting. He thinks he is a conquering general, but he walks like a duck with a pebble in its shoe. Liling, Jian declared, striking his signature heroic pose. One hand resting on the hilt of a ceremonial sword, he clearly did not know how to use. The carriage is waiting outside the estate walls. I have officially purchased the southern courtyard. The time for hiding your devotion is over. We leave now. I swallowed my bite of the bun, and wiped my mouth with a napkin. I thought I made it very clear that we are broken up. I even hit you with a broom. Did the broom not convey my lack of romantic interest? Jian waved a dismissive hand, chuckling as if I had just told a mild joke. A lover's quarrel. You were simply testing my resolve. But I am a generous prince, and I forgive your childish outburst. Now come. The carriage driver is waiting. He stepped forward and actually grabbed my wrist. Big mistake. I hadn't eaten my second bun yet. My glucose levels dipped slightly from the sudden spike in stress, and a fierce flash of hangry irritation flared up in my chest. Let go of me, I warned, my voice dropping an octave. Do not be shy, my delicate flower. I grabbed the heavy, solid celadone teapot from the stone table with my free hand. Thanks to my daily scroll lifting routine and a diet rich in protein, my arms had gained actual muscle mass. I was no longer a damp paper lantern. I swung the teapot. Clunk. It connected solidly with the side of Jian's head. The thick ceramic didn't break, but the Crown Prince certainly did. His eyes rolled back, his knees buckled, and he crumpled to the pavilion floor like a discarded silk robe. The two burly palace guards stared in pure shock. Min slowly set her teacup down. She looked at the unconscious heir to the throne, then looked at me. You just assaulted the Crown Prince with tea. It was self-defense, I said, rubbing my wrist. He was trying to kidnap me while my blood sugar was dropping. That is a lethal combination. Ghost Liling was hyperventilating, zooming around the roof of the pavilion in panicked circles. Treason. High treason. We will be locked in the dungeons for 1,000 years. They will feed us plain rice gruel forever. Only if they find him, Min said thoughtfully. She stood up, brushed off her exquisite skirts, and reached into her silk pouch. She pulled out 2 heavy pieces of silver, and tossed them to the stunned palace guards. You saw nothing. The prince tripped on a loose paving stone and hit his own head. The guards looked at the silver, looked at Jian snoring lightly on the floorboards, and nodded vigorously. They turned around and marched right back out the moon gate. Now what? I asked, looking down at the royal nuisance. Grab his feet, Min instructed, grabbing Jian by the shoulders of his extremely expensive, gold-embroidered tunic. There is a very thick patch of bushes near the edge of the lotus pond. If we tuck him behind the ornamental rocks, nobody will find him until he wakes up. What if it rains? Ghost Liling fretted, hovering over us as we dragged the prince across the grass. Then he gets a free bath, I grunted, hauling his boots over a thick tree root. Which is great, considering his terrible hand-washing habits. We shoved Jian deep into the azalea bushes, completely obscuring him from view. Min arranged a few leafy branches over his face for good measure, dusted off her hands, and gave a highly satisfied nod. Well, she smiled, linking her arm through mine. That was incredibly fulfilling. Shall we go find the kitchens and demand some candied plums? Let's ask for 2 plates, I agreed, walking back toward the pavilion. Kidnapping attempts really burn through your glucose reserves. Chapter 11. Within a week, the word had spread through the capital like wildfire. People weren't talking about the Crown Prince's mysterious tripping incident in the minister's garden. They were talking about the healing pavilion. I had officially transformed the back garden pavilion into a clinic. My father, terrified of my fainting episodes, but increasingly impressed by my results, had financed the purchase of clean linens, medicinal herbs, and a massive supply of high-quality rice and dried meats to keep me properly fueled. Ghost Liling hovered near the clinic entrance, checking her reflection in a polished bronze tray every 5 seconds. We have a steady stream of noble women wanting advice on posture and energy levels. You are becoming quite the sensation, Liling. Though, could you perhaps stop drinking tea out of a common ceramic mug? It is not very empress-like. I am not an empress, I am a doctor, I replied, adjusting my apron. And this ceramic mug is heat-resistant, which is all I care about. A line of patients snaked out of the garden gate. Merchants' wives, minor officials, and even a few of the palace guards who had been present during the tea incident were standing in line, looking remarkably nervous. My first patient of the day was the wife of a wealthy silk merchant. She had been complaining of chronic lethargy and headaches. After a quick assessment, and ensuring she had a piece of candied ginger in her hand, I diagnosed her with severe dehydration and a lack of proper protein. You aren't going to prescribe ghost-warding talismans? She asked, clutching her purse. I am going to prescribe 3 meals a day, 2 liters of boiled water, and a walk in the sun, I said, handing her a list written in clear, simple characters. If you do not feel better in a week, come back. As the morning progressed, the clinic grew busier. I was in the middle of teaching a junior maid how to properly sterilize linen bandages when a group of handsome imperial guards, led by a man with a suspiciously well-kept mustache, stepped into the pavilion. They weren't looking for talismans. They were looking for the doctor who cured the Empress's hands. My wrists ache from training, the head guard explained, looking around the clinic with wide, impressed eyes. Sit, I said, pointing to a wooden stool. Ghost Liling suddenly turned bright pink, and did a frantic loop-de-loop. Oh my heavens! That is Captain Wei. He is the most eligible bachelor in the capital. Stop looking at his sword and look at his eyes, Liling. Fix his wrist elegantly. I ignored the ghost and began palpating the captain's forearm, searching for the source of his tendinitis. You've been over-gripping your blade. You need to soften your wrist tension and start incorporating wrist-strengthening exercises. And for heaven's sake, stop soaking your hands in ice-cold river water after training. Captain Wei looked at me, his gaze lingering a second too long. You speak with the confidence of a royal physician, yet you possess the grace of something far more interesting. She possesses a medical degree that would baffle your entire dynasty, Liling chimed in, though only I could hear her. And a very healthy appetite for roast duck. By the time the sun began to set, I was exhausted. My feet ached, but my heart was full. I had seen 20 patients, successfully treated 3 infections without using a single burning herb, and had not fainted once. We did it, I whispered, sitting down at my desk and reaching for a plate of leftover steamed buns. Liling sat down beside me, her translucent face soft. You know, even the Crown Prince never looked at me the way Captain Wei just looked at you. And he certainly never treated me like I was capable of saving anyone. That is because you are capable of saving yourself, I said, handing her a spectral piece of a bun, though it passed right through her hand. And tonight, we have plenty of leftovers. I took a bite of my bun, feeling the strength returning to my limbs. For the first time, I didn't feel like a tragic, fading flower. I felt like a doctor. And in ancient China, that was a superpower. Chapter 12. The clinic was thriving, which meant my daily caloric intake had to increase to keep up with the workload. I was sitting at my consultation table, dipping a piece of crispy fried dough into a bowl of sweet soy milk, when the clinic doors burst open with a loud, dramatic crash. Crown Prince Jian marched into the courtyard, flanked by 4 palace guards. He was back in his aggressively gold-embroidered robes, though I noticed he was standing a very safe distance away from my teapot. Ghost Liling immediately dropped the spectral scroll she was pretending to read. He has returned. Oh, the tragedy. He is going to declare our medical practice illegal and drag us to the dungeons. He is going to stand there and look ridiculous, I corrected quietly, taking a bite of my fried dough. Jian pointed a dramatic finger at me. Liling, this farce ends today. I have tolerated your little rebellion. But a woman of your station running a public pavilion? Touching the dirty hands of commoners? It brings shame to the crown. I am not married to the crown, I pointed out, chewing happily. And my hands are very clean. I washed them with soap. You should try it. Jian's face flushed a deep, angry plum color. You are mocking my patience. I am the future emperor. I decree that this so-called clinic be shut down immediately. Guards, clear the courtyard and smash those ridiculous ceramic pots. The 4 guards hesitated. 2 of them had been present when I knocked Jian out with the teapot, and the other 2 had recently received my excellent ginger salve prescription for lower back pain. They looked at the pots, then at me, then down at their boots. Nobody moved. Did you hear me? Jian shrieked, his voice cracking slightly. They heard you, Jian. They just think you are being incredibly loud and deeply embarrassing. A smooth voice called out from the garden entrance. Zhao Min strolled into the pavilion, looking flawless in a deep sapphire hanfu. She was accompanied by a massive retinue of servants carrying heavy, brass-bound chests. Min walked right past the sputtering crown prince and set a thick, official-looking scroll on my table. What is the meaning of this, Min? Jian demanded, marching toward her. You should be supporting your future husband. Tell this stubborn Lotus to pack up her weeds and go back to her room. Min slowly turned to face him, a smile of pure pity on her face. I am not telling her to do anything. In fact, I am paying her to do more. She unrolled the scroll, revealing the grand red wax seal of the Prime Minister. My father has officially declared the Healing Pavilion a protected charity of our estate. He has provided a massive endowment to ensure Dr. Liling can treat whoever she pleases. Jian stared at the seal, his mouth hanging open. The Prime Minister? My own future father-in-law is funding my runaway concubine. First of all, I was never your concubine, I said, dipping another piece of dough into my soy milk. Second, you really need to work on your phrasing. You sound like a rejected poet. Jian's eye began to twitch. The smug, royal facade completely dissolved, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated rage of a man who was used to the world bowing at his feet. He stomped his foot. Actually, genuinely stomped his heavily booted foot on the stone tiles. It is not fair. Jian yelled, throwing his arms in the air like a toddler who had just dropped his favorite sugar toy in the dirt. You are supposed to love me. You are supposed to weep when I look away. Why is everyone funding her? Why are my own guards not smashing the pots? Ghost Liling floated down, inspecting Jian's red, contorted face. Goodness. He is sweating through his silk. And his voice is very shrill. Is this what I used to cry over? Yes, I whispered to the ghost. Your taste in men was severely compromised by your lack of carbohydrates. I will tell the emperor. Jian continued to wail, pacing back and forth. I will tell him the prime minister is conspiring with a madwoman who uses heavy kitchenware as weapons. Min casually reached over to my desk, picked up a candied date, and tossed it into her mouth. Go ahead, Jian. Tell your father. Tell the emperor that you are throwing a public fit because a girl rejected your secret courtyard and decided to cure illnesses instead. I am sure he will be incredibly proud of your leadership skills. Jian stopped pacing. He looked at Min, who was eating my snacks. He looked at the guards, who were actively avoiding eye contact with him. Finally, he looked at me, sitting perfectly calm with a stable blood glucose level. He let out a loud, frustrated screech, spun on his heel, and stormed out of the courtyard, kicking a stray pebble on his way out. The courtyard fell silent for a moment before Min let out a loud snort of laughter. Well, she grinned, pulling one of the heavy brass chests forward. Now that the pest control is handled, where should we put the new supplies? Chapter 13. The first sign of the outbreak was a widespread, chorus-like coughing echoing over the capital's stone walls. By noon on Tuesday, it sounded like 1,000 barking seals had invaded the city. By Wednesday morning, the healing pavilion was completely flooded with sweating, shivering patients. Old Dr. Liu and the imperial physicians decided their best course of action was to run through the streets throwing dried mung beans at pedestrians to scare the sickness away. I immediately confiscated their baskets of beans and had the kitchen boil them into a nutrient-rich soup instead. We need a triage system, I shouted, tying a clean cloth mask over the lower half of my face. I was wearing a custom-made sash equipped with small pouches. It functioned exactly like a warrior's weapon belt, except it was heavily armed with candied dates, salted plums, and hard sugar drops. If my blood sugar crashed right now, the entire quarantine protocol would collapse. What is a triage? Xiaomin asked, standing beside me. She had ditched her heavy silk gowns for a practical, unembroidered cotton robe, and was holding a massive ledger, ready to organize the chaos. It means we separate the very sick from the mildly sick, so they stop coughing on each other. I explained, popping a sugar drop into my mouth. Chun, bring out the large vats of boiled water. We need to mix the hydration salts. My master invention was incredibly simple. A precise ratio of clean water, salt, and sugar. The imperial doctors called it witch's broth. I called it basic electrolyte replacement, and it was saving hundreds of people from dehydration. Ghost Liling was zipping back and forth through the crowds, proving to be the most efficient medical scout in history. Because she was a spirit, she could float right through the pavilion walls and inspect the waiting line without catching the flu. The merchant by the Lotus Pond has a very high fever, Liling called out, pointing a transparent finger. And the guard near the gate is trying to hide his cough, but he looks like a boiled prawn. Min, send squad 3 to the gate, I directed, grabbing a steaming bowl of broth and handing it to a shivering child. And someone fetch me a pork bun. My hands are starting to shake. Min immediately reached into her own pockets, pulled out a slice of dried pear, and shoved it directly into my mouth. Chew while you walk, doctor. We have 20 more patients in the outer courtyard. For 4 days, we worked non-stop. The pavilion ran like a well-oiled machine. My father, the minister, surprised everyone by rolling up his expensive sleeves and personally stirring the massive pots of medicinal soup. He even yelled at Dr. Liu for trying to sneak a burning sage bundle into the quarantine tent. On the 5th day, Crown Prince Jian decided to make an appearance. He arrived at the front gates of the estate, surrounded by guards holding large, feathery fans to blow the foul air away from him. He wore a cloth mask made of sheer, sparkling gold silk, which offered exactly 0 filtration, and carried a bouquet of strongly scented lilies. Liling, Jian called out from a very safe distance of 30 feet. I have come to inspect your little charity project. The Emperor is very pleased with my leadership during this crisis. I paused mid-stride, holding a wooden ladle in one hand and a half-eaten chicken drumstick in the other. I stared at him. Your leadership? You have been hiding in the palace for a week. I was coordinating from the throne room. Jian puffed out his chest. I suggested the bean-throwing method. Ghost Liling groaned so loudly a nearby dog tilted its head. He is taking credit for your work. Throw the chicken bone at him. I cannot, it is unsanitary, I muttered back. Jian, Min yelled from across the courtyard, not even looking up from her ledger. If you step foot inside this quarantine zone without a proper cotton face covering, you will catch the flu. And I promise you, I will personally make sure your medicine tastes like dirty pond water. Jian took a hasty step backward, his gold silk mask fluttering. I am the Crown Prince. Illness dare not touch my royal blood. Just to prove my point, I grabbed a wooden bucket filled with strong, distilled vinegar, our primitive disinfectant, and hurled the liquid in a wide arc right near his boots. The pungent smell hit the air like a physical wall. Sanitation protocol. I shouted. Step back or get sprayed. Jian shrieked, covering his nose, and scrambled back into his royal carriage so fast he nearly tripped over his own robes. You are completely unhinged. Both of you. As the carriage tore away down the street, the courtyard erupted into cheers from the recovering patients. I took a massive bite of my chicken, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. My blood glucose was stable, the flu was under control, and the Crown Prince had essentially just banished himself. Excellent aim, Min grinned, handing me a fresh cup of tea. Thank you, I smiled. Now let's go check on those fevers. Chapter 14. The summons to the Emperor's Great Hall arrived wrapped in yellow silk, carried by 4 royal guards. The flu epidemic had officially passed, the quarantine tents were down, and I was deeply engaged in eating a massive bowl of roasted chestnuts when the decree was read. The Emperor requests your presence, my father said, looking immensely proud. He immediately reached into his deep pockets and handed me an extra pouch of candied ginger. Here. The Great Hall is very large, and the walk from the gates might dip your blood glucose. Thank you, father, I said, securing the pouch in my sash. When I arrived at the imperial court, the sheer scale of the room was daunting. Massive pillars carved with golden dragons held up a ceiling that seemed to touch the sky. Hundreds of courtiers, officials, and nobles stood in perfectly silent rows. I spotted Zhao Min standing near the front with her father, the prime minister. She gave me a discreet, highly unladylike wink. Sitting on the raised golden throne was the emperor himself. He looked tired but imposing. Standing just below him on the royal dais was Crown Prince Jian, wearing a fresh set of gold-embroidered robes and a deeply smug expression. Ghost Liling floated right beside me, looking around the grand hall. Instead of panicking or weeping about court protocol, she simply crossed her transparent arms and evaluated the room. The emperor's posture is terribly slumped, she whispered to me. You should prescribe him a firmer cushion. I bowed low, making sure to keep my knees slightly bent so my circulation wouldn't lock up and cause a fainting spell. Rise, Liling, daughter of the Minister of Rights. The emperor's voice boomed across the silent hall. You have done a great service to this dynasty. While my own physicians were throwing dried beans at the wind, you implemented order, cleanliness, and that very salty water. You saved thousands. I merely applied basic medical science, Your Majesty, I said, reaching into my sleeve to pull out a single roasted chestnut. I cracked it quietly and popped it into my mouth to keep my hands from shaking. The emperor smiled, clearly amused by my mid-court snacking. For your unmatched skill, I offer you the permanent position of Chief Imperial Physician. You will have your own courtyard, a massive budget, and the gratitude of the throne. The entire hall gasped. The chief physician was a title held only by old men with very long beards. Before I could formally accept, Crown Prince Jian stepped forward. He threw his arms open, looking out at the crowd as if he had just won a grand tournament. Do you see, father? Do you see the depth of her devotion? Jian declared loudly, puffing out his chest. She has accepted her place in the palace. She could not bear to be away from me. My sweet Lotus, you no longer have to hide in the shadows. I accept your return to my side. The hall went dead silent. I paused, chewing my chestnut slowly. I swallowed, dusted my fingers off on a silk handkerchief, and looked up at the royal dais. Your Majesty, I said, speaking directly to the emperor and completely ignoring his son. I humbly and joyfully accept the position of chief imperial physician. Jian beamed, taking a step down the stairs toward me. Oh, Liling. However, I continued, my voice echoing clearly off the marble floors, I must clarify a severe misunderstanding. I am accepting a prestigious medical job. I am not accepting your son. In fact, I am publicly and officially rejecting him. Jian froze on the steps. His foot hung in midair. What? We have incompatible health goals, I explained to the emperor, folding my hands neatly in front of me. I require stable blood sugar, frequent meals, and a partner who washes his hands after using the latrine. The Crown Prince causes my glucose levels to plummet, heavily restricts my access to carbohydrates, and believes hygiene is a myth. For my own medical survival, I cannot be associated with him. A sound escaped the crowd. It was Zhao Min. She had slapped both hands over her mouth, her shoulders shaking violently as she tried to muffle a fit of laughter. The emperor stared at me. Then he looked at Jian, who was currently turning the color of a squashed plum. She rejected you? The emperor asked his son, his tone remarkably flat. She is confused. Jian stammered, his voice cracking. She hit me with a teapot last week. The tea clouded her mind. The emperor raised an eyebrow. She hit you with a teapot. And you still thought she was devoted to you? Jian, you are a fool. The emperor let out a loud, booming laugh that startled the royal guards. Liling, your diagnosis is sound. I would not wish my son's stubborn vanity on my worst enemy, let alone my best doctor. The position is yours with no romantic obligations attached. Jian looked as though he might burst into tears. He spun around and fled the great hall, his gold robe swishing dramatically behind him, leaving a chorus of stifled giggles in his wake. I turned slightly and smiled at Min, who gave me 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Ghost Liling did a happy loop in the air. A chief physician. And we did not even have to cry once. I think I prefer this destiny. Me too, I whispered, reaching for another chestnut. Chapter 15. My new quarters as the chief imperial physician were nothing short of a massive, glorious upgrade. The emperor had gifted me a sprawling courtyard right next to the royal kitchens. A highly strategic location I had specifically requested to maintain optimal glucose stability. I was sitting at my heavy mahogany desk, happily chewing on a sesame ball filled with sweet red bean paste. The clinic was closed for the evening, and the quiet courtyard was lit by the soft glow of paper lanterns. Zhao Min was lounging on a plush velvet couch across from me, shuffling a deck of painted playing cards. I heard Jian locked himself in his quarters again, she smirked, tossing a card onto the table. He claims the court is blind to true romance. My father says he is just upset because his new gold tunic clashes with his complexion. He needs to drink more water and stop wearing fabrics that trap heat, I replied, taking another bite of my snack. Dehydration makes people cranky. Min laughed, stood up, and brushed off her simple, elegant skirts. I must return to the estate. Father wants me to review the grain ledgers. I will see you tomorrow, Dr. Liling. Bring extra candied ginger when you come, I called out as she strolled through the moon gate. Once Min was gone, the room grew quiet. I looked up. Ghost Liling was floating near the ceiling, but she looked different. The tragic, watery-eyed pout was completely gone. Her semi-transparent form seemed brighter, warmer, and much less fragile. She drifted down slowly, landing her spectral feet on the woven floor mat. For the first time since I arrived in this body, she didn't look like she was about to burst into tears. You look nice, I noted, popping the rest of the sesame ball into my mouth. Are you finally getting used to the fact that we don't weep recreationally anymore? Liling smiled. It was a genuine, beautiful smile. I was watching you today in the Great Hall. You did not shake. You did not bow your head and wait to be saved. You stood in front of the emperor, ate a chestnut, and told the Crown Prince you would rather be alone than be miserable. Well, yes. Medical survival requires strict boundaries, I said, wiping my fingers on a napkin. And Jian is a walking health hazard. Liling floated closer, hovering just over my desk. She looked at my hands, her hands. They were no longer pale and trembling. They were steady, slightly calloused from mixing herbal pastes, and full of life. When I was alive, all I wanted was for Jian to notice me, she confessed softly, her glowing robe swaying in a phantom breeze. I thought if I was just delicate enough, sad enough, and quiet enough he would protect me. I thought suffering in a drafty cottage or freezing in the cold palace was the price of true love. A toxic plotline designed to keep you weak, I said gently. You deserved better than a man who only liked you when you were helpless. I know that now, Liling nodded. The edges of her transparent form began to shimmer with tiny specks of golden light. I see how the servants look at you. I see how your father respects you, and how Min treats you like an equal. Even Captain Wei cannot stop finding excuses to visit the clinic for wrist examinations. I coughed lightly, feeling my cheeks flush a sudden warm pink. He has very tight tendons. It is a chronic issue. Liling laughed, a bright, musical sound that filled the room. You are a terrible liar, doctor, but a wonderful occupant of this body. You made me strong. You made me brilliant. And you made sure I never went hungry again. The golden light around her started to grow brighter, swirling around her shoulders like a glowing silk scarf. I stood up, suddenly realizing what was happening. You are fading, I said, a strange lump forming in my throat. We had spent the last several months bickering over roast duck and sweeping brooms, and I was actually going to miss my dramatic ghost roommate. My soul was tied here by regret and unfulfilled destiny, Liling explained, looking down at her hands as they slowly dissolved into warm light. But there is no regret left. You broke the tragic plot. You saved us. I am ready to move on to the afterlife. I hear they have excellent poetry and no narcissists. Probably better snacks too. I smiled, though my eyes felt a little damp. Liling gave me a deep, perfect, highly elegant spectral bow. Live freely, Liling. Do not let the imperial court tell you how to behave. Keep your head high, your mind sharp. She paused, her form almost completely faded into the golden light. And please, her voice echoed softly in the room. Always keep dried plums in your pockets. I promise, I whispered to the empty air. With a final, joyful chime that sounded like tiny silver bells, the light vanished. Ghost Liling was gone. I stood alone in my beautiful, spacious quarters. My heart felt incredibly light, and my blood sugar was perfectly stable. I walked over to the window, took a deep breath of the cool night air, and smiled. Tomorrow, I had a clinic to run. Epilogue. 5 years later, at the exact time I was supposed to be weeping in the freezing cold palace, I was sitting in the sunlit gardens of the capital's most prestigious medical academy. I founded it myself, thanks to the massive financial backing of my best friend, Zhao Min. Min had long since broken her betrothal to Crown Prince Jian. She took over her father's estate accounts and proved to be so brilliant with numbers that the emperor appointed her as the royal treasurer. She visits my clinic twice a week, mostly to steal my candied walnuts and complain about the tax ledgers. As for Jian, his fate was poetic. To secure a border treaty, the emperor married him off to a formidable princess from a neighboring kingdom. She has a zero-tolerance policy for his dramatic poetry, forces him to wear highly breathable, unembroidered cotton, and makes him wash his hands 6 times a day with strong lye soap. Word in the court is that he is completely miserable, which brings me endless joy. My parents are thriving. My father's digestion is flawless, mostly because my mother watches his vegetable intake like a hawk. He still refuses to change his official minister robes, preferring the customized ones with the extra deep pockets, so he can carry a constant supply of dried plums, just in case my blood glucose ever dips during a family dinner. It rarely does these days. I have my diet strictly managed, and I haven't fainted once in 5 years. I have enough stamina to teach anatomy classes all morning and run the clinic all afternoon without a single dizzy spell. Right now, I was taking a brief break in my private courtyard. My hands were busy with a relaxing pastime I had recently picked up to keep my manual dexterity sharp for surgeries. I had commissioned a traveling merchant to bring me incredibly soft baby wool from the western trade routes, and I was currently crocheting a small winter blanket. I was meticulously applying a visible joining technique, linking the brightly colored yarn squares together with thick, contrasting stitches, so the seams formed a beautiful raised pattern. That is a very strange medical tool, Dr. Liling. A deep, familiar voice called out. I looked up from my yarn. Captain Wei strolled through the circular moon gate, out of his imperial guard armor, and wearing casual, dark blue robes. He was carrying a large, steaming paper-wrapped package that smelled gloriously of roasted duck and garlic. It is not a medical tool, it is a blanket, I corrected, securing the yarn with a final knot and setting the hook down. And it keeps me from throwing heavy ceramic teapots at annoying courtiers. Did you bring the duck? I would never dare visit the chief physician without proper protein offerings, Wei smiled, setting the massive package on my stone table. He took a seat next to me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He reached out and gently nudged my bowl of emergency sugar drops closer to my hand, just as a precaution. We had been married for 2 years now. He completely understood my strict snack schedule, possessed excellent personal hygiene, and never once asked me to be a delicate weeping flower. He liked me loud, opinionated, and well-fed. Eat, Wei instructed, unwrapping the duck. You have a massive lecture on proper wound sanitation in an hour, and I refuse to let your stomach start growling in front of the new students. I grabbed a crispy piece of duck skin, chewing happily as the afternoon sun warmed the courtyard tiles. I thought about the tragic, 15-year plot I was supposed to endure, and the dramatic ghost who had finally found her peace. I had completely ruined the story. I rejected the toxic royal heir, bypassed the miserable cold palace, cured my own hypoglycemia, and built a life filled with actual respect, deep friendships, and an endless supply of good food. Take that, tragic romance destiny. The fragile White Lotus is officially off the menu. That's where this love story ends for now. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more romantic twists. Tell me in the comments what will you have done. Until the next story, keep craving romance.